All right, let's go ahead and get started here. Everybody, hey, thank you so much for joining us. I'm What's the Deets. I'm the new external affairs lead here for KeeperDAO Labs, and this is our very first KeeperDAO community call. We're excited to have everybody here. I mean, this is something that we put into place months ago and really wanted to get this going and start a conversation with all of our most adamant supporters. And so without hesitating, I really want to just jump right in, get through a couple business items, and we will get over to our featured speakers. So before we really kick off the call, I wanted to start with a question for any of our kind of newer users, like, what is KeeperDAO? Well, here at KeeperDAO, we are making DeFi more secure, more profitable, and egalitarian for users, protocols, and keepers through coordinating, capturing, and redistributing on-chain profits. But as a normal user that might be new to us, well, what does that mean for me? Well, for typical DeFi users, we have three awesome products available. The first one is our hiding game, which is our decentralized exchange where users place free limit orders on their favorite tokens. And if those orders get filled, a portion of the arbitraged amount will be returned to the user in the form of our token Rook. We also have our liquidity mining protocol, which is based off of our newly upgraded just-in-time underwriter. So the just-in-time underwriter is the next evolution of our liquidity pool, which combines our previous flash loaning functionality with new methods of safe underwriting for loans. This gives our keepers one-stop access to liquidity and distributes rewards back to liquidity providers who stake their assets in our app. We look at our kind of biggest and newest reveal, which was the hiding vaults in K Compound is our last product. So the hiding vaults, it's the background of our lending protocol. It protects your position from the open market by cloaking it and uses the just-in-time underwriter to buffer at-risk loans. K Compound is our first available lending protocol for the hiding vault, and it's a plugin of the Compound lending platform that lets users deposit collateral and borrow assets as they normally would on Compound. These loans are protected by our G2, our just-in-time underwriter, and they earn additional rewards in Rook for having open loans. But so for all you new, that's kind of what we have available for users in a nutshell. We're going to continue growing. There's some really exciting new products for keepers coming down the line. But our line of DeFi products is something that we are really proud of. And if you have more questions about that, feel free to post them in the chat as well. So this brings us to why we're here today. Today, we're introducing this KeeperDAO Community Call program. These will be a series of topic-based community calls that feature a discussion or presentation by the KeeperDAO team, followed by community source questions or presentations that usually revolve around the topics call today, but sometimes they're more general questions about crypto or our operations. Funny enough, this was an idea that I put out in Discord a couple months ago as a way to foster a more open conversation around major crypto topics and important decisions that the KeeperDAO team was making. And now, it's something that we're bringing to life, and it's very, very exciting to me. So these calls, which will typically be once a month, but there may be some as needed calls based off of important stuff that happens throughout our acts. And our goal is really to have community members help drive these conversations by both submitting questions to our speakers and presenting new ideas and proposals to the team for, let's say, new partnerships or new products or UI additions, anything like that. So really, this is a big call to action for our most skilled community members, and the ideas and proposals presented in these calls really just lay the foundation for, let's say, potential grants through upcoming governments, new partnerships with others in the crypto space, and really just an overall better KeeperDAO system. Okay, more than enough Deets grandstanding here. Let's get to actually why you guys are here today. I'm going to introduce the two great guys that we have speaking on MEV opportunities in the dark forest. So first is Joey Zakharov, JZ. He is a founder at KeeperDAO, where we provide infrastructure for capturing and distributing MEV to users with the goal of making DeFi more secure and profitable for all parties involved. His background includes trading, market making, automation, engineering, decentralized exchanges, and cybersecurity. And then also on the call, we have Nathan Worsley, who is an MEV engineer, and his work, as many of you probably have seen, has really influenced the MEV space. He's also been a part of Local Coin Swap, Alchemist, and DeFi Cartel. So without any more hesitation, let's open up the floor to both of these gentlemen, and let's kick off the conversation on MEV opportunities in the dark forest. Jason, Nathan, take it away.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me here.
Thanks, Deets. Hello everybody. Thanks for taking the lead on the introduction. Nathan, welcome. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. Our conversations have always been entertaining, and we've been kind of having these types of conversations, privately for a while now. And so when these community calls came up, we decided that it's probably a good time to do one of these, publicly. So thanks a lot for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, we've had a lot of conversations that have been booked in at 15 or 20 minutes, and 2 or 3 hours later, we're still talking about MEV. So it's kind of just taking out to the public what we're already talking about in private.
Definitely. Yeah, I know that you'll sometimes joke that, we kind of got to be careful, what we say, because, we might be leaking alpha or kind of doing, some free consulting to the world. So maybe we kind of need to rein a few things in. But I still think there's a lot of really good, valuable discussions we can have just purely openly.
Cool. So I think the first topic we wanted to talk about was what the distinction is between hunting for alpha and just hacking someone, because I think the line is sometimes quite blurred.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting though, because they really use the same exact skill set. And when you think of, two different things, they're very different, maybe when thinking about ethics, and morals, but really it's like they apply the same skill set. And I wonder, how many people who, do the type of trading that we do started out in one direction and went the other, or maybe started out in one direction and stayed down that path, and maybe were tempted by, hacking but never did, or, it's interesting to look at the different ways that people get into this.
Yeah, you can definitely be thrust onto the moral equivalent of a knife's edge sometimes when you're hunting MEV. I guess on the MEV sort of broadly divides into two categories, which is short tail and long tail MEV. And short tail is the really traditional stuff like arbitrage and liquidations and sandwich trading to some degree. That stuff, I mean, you can argue about the ethics of sandwich trading, but there's not as much gray area when you're looking at short tail types of alpha. But when you get to the long tail, that's where I think it can get really dicey. Like whether you're hacking or whether you're hunting alpha, maybe you're exploiting a gambling contract. Maybe you're exploiting or draining other bots. It's difficult to know where the distinction is, but I'm sure at some point there will be some kind of legal case where this distinction will be established. But yeah, to give you a little short story, I guess, that sort of highlights this burning question. There was recently quite a large Salmonella version 2 exploit where a number of arbitrage and sandwich contracts were drained, and the guy who did it got over, I think, a little bit over $1 million in total from this exploit. So the first exploit happened, I think he got 35 Ethereum from it, and it just hadn't gone really public yet. So it was going around in trading circles, but it wasn't blowing up on Twitter at that point. And myself and 2 other people, we got together and we saw that this exploit had happened. We thought, well, there's all these other contracts that this could be done on. Why don't we work on this together? So we did a historical replication of this guy's exploit. We had a hard hat repository spun up. We replicated his exploit. It utilized a problem where traders were using TX Origin to defend their contracts. And you can replicate the TX origin when you create a poison token that you entice these people to trade. So we've done the historical replication, and we'd scanned the market. We discovered a bunch of contracts that were vulnerable to this, and we were preparing these poison cool data payloads for these contracts. And we were decompiling contracts and just getting really into the weeds of this. We were about 80% of the way through when we just suddenly realized, like, this might be illegal. Like, I think we might actually be crossing the line here. This actually might be like hacking and not just a really cool long tail alpha. So yeah, we ended up not going forward with it and trying to actually alert the contracts that we were originally planning to drain. So we were successful at alerting a couple of these contracts, but unfortunately the same hacker from earlier in the day struck again and got a whole bunch more contracts. But it was, for me, that was really like the most dicey sort of ethical situation I've ever faced in MEV before. I feel like in the end we made the right decision, but yeah, it's crazy the kinds of situations you can be thrust into in this world.
Yeah, that's such a fascinating story, and really, it's a perfect example of where you can, draw that line between alpha and hacking. And it goes to show that MEV is such a broad term, and you have people trying to kind of change the name and kind of morph what it is, and categorize it, but it's such a broad thing, and you could, like you said, you've got long tail, short tail, you've got, exploiting protocols, you can exploit other traders, and, so it's way beyond just, trying to arbitrage Uniswap, and it's so much, it's such a big thing, and there's a lot to it, and that's such a great story. I wonder, I like to think of like the example of, Aladdin in the Cave of Wonders, where, he's going after the lamp, but, you're surrounded by treasure and jewelry, and, his monkey pal is there and gets tempted. And it's like, as soon as you touch it, you get tainted and you've crossed that line. Like, I wonder, like, how many people think about this versus are just in there and just doing it and don't even think about it and kind of just turn their brains off, and they're just capturing as much money as they can. It's kind of interesting because one thing I've noticed from talking to people who do this type of trading and just do any type of just pure arbitrage, just anything through automation, is some of them are fully aware of the ecosystem around them, and some of them aren't at all, and they're so niche and specialized that they don't notice other avenues and things. I wonder have you talked to people who are kind of fall into one of those two categories, or do most of the people that you talk to, are they kind of fully aware of what's going on around them?
Yeah, I think most people fall into the category of the short tail alpha, where there's not so much dicey ethical questions. But yeah, definitely, it's always this debate among people doing long tail alpha about whether they're going too far. I think often they don't even know themselves, and it's usually they usually only realize when they've gone too far. It's really hard to think about what rules you can apply to these situations ethically. I think to some level, the specificity has to come into it. Like, if you are targeting one particular person, you're decompiling their contract, that feels a lot more black hat than it does gray hat. If you're doing something a bit more broad, I think, that's probably more on the gray hat side, but there's no real hard and fast rules here. Yeah,
definitely. And it's weird because there's this, I don't know how to describe it, but it's kind of like a messed up ecosystem where, there's different behaviors where something will happen and then the ecosystem will change, and then it'll evolve. Maybe a new protocol comes out or a new feature comes out and the ecosystem changes. And it's interesting because you kind of have this inefficiencies from audits, and then another factor, which is kind of like a curveball in the whole thing, is traders probably 99% of the time don't even audit their smart contracts, because it's if you have a competitive trading contract that could potentially have a security leak, why would you give it to some auditor to have them audit it, only for them to maybe take it and then start trading with it? So it's kind of everything's kind of self-audited, self-tested, and there's holes in people's trading contracts. And then it's interesting because there's just a lot of just security challenges around building on blockchains in general, and all of this just kind of leads to hackers having an easy time to exploit and just basically grab money that's just unprotected, maybe because some weird like a poison token, like you mentioned. It's messed up because it's this weird ecosystem where people sometimes they mean good and sometimes maybe they mean bad, but everyone's kind of exposed to some degree, and there's a lot of evolving going on with this weird ecosystem. And I think definitely there's a lot of people who may be potentially exposed to things like poison tokens, and you think about maybe what is the next threat to these systems. And actually, what's interesting is one of the questions that somebody posed in our community chat it was along the lines of whitelisting whitelisting tokens, and why can't we just immediately dynamically support tokens? And that's a really loaded question, and there's a lot that goes into it. And we were kind of debating on bringing it in versus not, just because it's quite a loaded question. But it's interesting because as you mentioned, the fundamentals behind the salmonella style attack is that a lot of bots just blindly trade any token at any given moment, and that can have a lot of interesting consequences. But it really depends on is the trade being performed in one single transaction or maybe over multiple transactions, and there's a lot going on there. But anyway, it's interesting with all these efficiencies and risks, auditing inefficiencies and just security challenges that kind of make all this alpha versus hacking such an interesting topic.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really difficult to audit a Solidity contract properly. If you look at almost all of the major hacks that have happened, they've all been from contracts that have been audited, often multiple times. And even when it comes to whitelisting tokens, that's an incredibly difficult thing to do, because firstly, you can have upgradable tokens. So you could whitelist a token, it could be fine, and then the token could change. And secondly, you can just hide things in tokens quite easily that can get past forms of whitelisting. If you're analyzing the source code, it's very easy to miss something. If you're simulating and looking at how the contract behaves, you can make a contract behave differently when it's being simulated. So even whitelisting itself is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. And it's the evolution of trading. It used to just be single transaction arbitrages, and then it kind of evolved to these multi-transaction arbitrages, especially with sandwich trading, and that kind of exposed some really new ways to think about MEV and how you might extract it from potentially another trader as well. So it's like there are many different kind of like tiers, and things can fall into different tiers based on their complexity and what type of trading that contract is doing. So it's quite complex. It's funny because I wonder the small percentage of contracts out there that are audited. I wonder how many of them are targeted, specifically because they're audited, or maybe specifically because they're not audited. There's a lot of different ways to go about that. It's interesting.
Yeah, there's definitely some auditing firms where it's like, oh, they audited this contract, well, then I better check it out because they've probably done quite a few things.
Definitely. Cool. So the next topic we wanted to chat about was a mindset of an MEV trader, and how we and other folks approach MEV trading. So a lot of good topics to discuss here. And this may be more interesting for newer folks and folks who don't do the trading, and then obviously folks who do the trading, this may be just kind of either stuff they already do or stuff that they're already aware of. But like when I think of when I think of this style of trading, it's interesting because there's a lot of different approaches you can take, right? So somebody might try to do one thing really, really well and specialize in that one thing, and then just kind of do that as many places as they can. Other folks might cast like a larger net and try to do, maybe as many things as they can, as well as they can. And it's kind of that classic, jack of all trades, master of none sort of a thing. But it's interesting because I think there's a lot of different specialties and a lot of people kind of doing a lot of different things. And a lot of times, many of them are successful, and not necessarily one strategy wins the day.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think it is very, very hard to be particularly generalized when you're trading MEV, just because strategies themselves have such a deep level of complexity. Personally, I've had bots that have been making money that I've turned off because I just don't have the bandwidth to focus on a lot of different things at once, compared to trying to be really good at one or two particular things. But yeah, definitely there's a difficulty in being very generalized. I think also a lot of people assume that trading MEV is much heavier on smart contracts than it actually is. I think it's not. It doesn't involve smart contracts anywhere near as much as people assume, and a lot of the optimization is actually going on the back end, on the bot side of things, in detecting the opportunities. I guess the way I view it is sort of like you're the engineer to a Formula One race car. Like you'll engineer every little part of the car to tweak every little bit of optimization that you can. If you can tweak part of the wheel, if you can tweak whatever you can tweak, you'll tweak it to get that extra little bit of optimization, because you just need that one good lap and to make all the money. It's really like, I think there's really a lot of analogies between running an MEV bot and being an engineer on a race car, or at least that's the way I like to conceptualize it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great visual there. That makes a lot of sense. I know that there's, depending on like what strategy you go, there can be a lot of different, ways to fine tune. But I definitely spend the large majority of my time, fine tuning the automation software that kind of drives it. I'm sure that's definitely the case for everyone else. But it's funny because I think a lot of newcomers, when they get into trading, the first thing they say is, "Oh, I want to trade. I want to write, a trading contract." And it's funny because unfortunately, there's not much material out there teaching people how to build these bots. And that initial reaction of, "Oh, I want to build a trading contract," is like, well, that's like 1% of the work. Now go do the other 99 first, and then you can actually do that 1% later. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, even though it is the 1%, I think it is a fun place to start.
Oh, definitely.
So I still think if someone was like starting in this industry, I'd probably tell them to build a contract to make some historical back tests. That's actually how I start the majority of my strategies. Like I don't inspire like myself to come up with a new strategy every time. Normally I'm following a strategy that someone else has already done. So generally the first thing I do is to analyze the market and look at how other people's contracts are working and try and replicate that myself. I mean, a lot of strategies just start with looking at like Bloxy or another type of explorer that gives you a little bit more of an in-depth flow of contract execution, looking at some trading transactions from another bot, and essentially just trying to replicate that myself and get my own bot making those exact same trades. And yeah, I'd say probably 90% of new strategies that I do start with that exact same process.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Cool. So let's jump on to our next topic. And you articulate this very well. So you're probably the best one to kind of, lead the initial discussion on this one. But it's really around, MEV on the protocol level versus the financial primitives level. I think there's a lot of misunderstandings with this, mainly because MEV is complicated and a lot of people who just kind of casually see things like Flashbots, KeeperDAO, they don't quite fully understand them. Part of that is kind of on us to explain them better. But anyways, please dive into that a bit.
Yeah, I think there's sort of two broad approaches to dealing with MEV. And the one that we've seen sort of dominating at the moment is this idea of trying to deal with it on the protocol level. So the way the blockchain itself works or the way that we do things on the blockchain. And I mean, I think that's a necessary part of the solution. You have to do it, but I think it's missing a big piece of the puzzle. As we've kind of seen, when you try and deal with things on a protocol level, I mean, at the end of the day, the miners or the validators are sort of the ultimate party that can extract on a protocol level. So that's sort of where you tend to see the profits and the value from MEV drifting towards. So I do see this trend where dealing with things on a protocol level just sort of drifts all of the value towards the block producers in the long run. But then the other option is to try and deal with that on the level of the financial primitive. I mean, after all, traders and miners and validators or whatever can only pick up the value that protocol developers are actually leaving on the table for them to pick up. So, the other idea is to actually deal with this in the way that you construct DEXs, in the way that you construct liquidation protocols, in the way that you actually build on the financial primitive level to prevent this even being an issue at all, to prevent block producers having sort of any ability to pick this up in a way that regular users of the chain can't. I think, that also has its own long run drift, but the long run drift of profit from dealing with things on the financial primitive level is a lot more towards the user. I mean, you tend to see then that users will choose protocols that give them more MEV back. And it's got its own long run drift, but I think on a long run, it's probably fairer that more value travels towards the users rather than more value traveling towards the block producers. But this is a hotly debated topic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also interesting because, on your last point, not to kind of skip over some of the previous discussions, we'll get to those in a moment, but it's also kind of interesting about, this kind of status quo effect where, if block producers are receiving a large share of the MEV, the thought of kind of going to I guess a more theoretically balanced situation where the users, the ones who are kind of creating opportunities, are then receiving them. That's kind of upsetting to them, and it kind of upsets that status quo, even if it's not necessarily what's correct. So it's kind of interesting there.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a huge amount of pushback from block producers on this kind of stuff. You saw and there's been a lot of drama recently where block producers have been just explicitly extracting value. And that's something that is always very divisive within the community.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting. So one of the things you mentioned, I wanted to dive into a bit. And so, an example that you brought up briefly was something like say a liquidation where MEV is kind of built into the protocol. And so there's a lot of different ways that we as, developers and engineers and architects of this space can make changes and think about this, right? So it's on one hand, you can kind of say, a lending protocol can just kind of put this on other projects like KeeperDAO, for example, and kind of let us, handle that MEV and distribute it, efficiently. In other ways, though, a protocol could kind of re-engineer and redesign their own protocol to kind of give that MEV directly back to the user and kind of take out that middleman, so to speak. But it's weird because at the same time, protocols are complex, and adding that would be like even more over engineering of their own protocol. So it almost, to some degree, it kind of makes sense, and to another degree, it doesn't make sense because these protocols are complex and hard to keep secure as it is. So trying to say hook up a lending protocol just naturally to some kind of a DEX aggregator to automatically route that MEV and distribute it back to the user just seems kind of strange. Maybe there are obviously simpler ways to do it, but it's interesting how there's different ways to look at it and different approaches. And I think a lot of like existing protocols and projects that have momentum, today, can greatly benefit, from something like KeeperDAO plugging into it and distributing that MEV back to the user without them having to modify their own protocol. So that's kind of the great benefit there.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, blockchains don't run themselves in terms of transactions. You don't have like automated actors on the blockchain that are just doing transactions automatically. So when you have a lending protocol, you need someone who's going to secure it, which is the liquidator, and you're just going to create some value to extract just by reason of that. You can't really create any sort of protocol on the blockchain where you try and incentivize people to step into the blockchain and doing things without creating some kind of extractable value. So the question becomes, where do you want that extractable value to go? You know that you have to create it. Are you going to let it just trend towards the block producers? Or are you going to try and funnel it somewhere else, which is essentially what we're trying to do with K-Compound.
Yes, yep, exactly. Cool. And so there's a question that a user had submitted. There's a really good question, and we're kind of saving the questions until the end, but we're going to bring this one up now because it's very much related to this topic. And so the question was, say if the top Flashbots searchers create their own coordination mechanism, what is KeeperDAO still needed for? And this was a really interesting question because it kind of highlights how just difficult this stuff is to understand. And I think the biggest part of the answer to this question is it's just about a misunderstanding of fundamentally how these things work. But it's not to fault of the person who asked the question, mainly because we haven't launched the coordination game yet, so our documentation isn't really public and able to digest yet. But basically, the answer here is a searcher using Flashbots outside of KeeperDAO is capturing MEV in the wild, and that MEV is subject to gas auctions and grid triggers, right? So because it's a pure auction where the highest bidder wins, it naturally sends the majority of the MEV to the miners because they're the block producers, because they're the ones who are essentially receiving that fee. And any searcher using Flashbots that is not coordinating with those, say, top searchers, all they have to do is bid higher than the others, and they will block the others from getting it. And then all of a sudden, now you have another gas auction that raises it up. And so the example would be, say there's the top 10 searchers who agree to bid exactly 50% of the MEV as a fee to the block producers, and they want to keep the other 50%. All it takes is one person on Flashbots who makes bids 51%. Now those 10 searchers who are cooperating together, now they get nothing. And so it's not quite that simple. That's where KeeperDAO really comes in. And it's also important to realize that MEV in the wild has no benefit to the user whatsoever, right? So there's no user getting a reward here. It's just a reward essentially goes to the block producers in this case.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even before Flashbots, which is kind of the popular solution now, that a large portion of the MEV was still going to the block producers, just in the form of these public gas auctions. And I think a lot of people don't conceptualize it. It's kind of like it's the same thing. If you're paying $10,000 in gas, I mean, a lot of these liquidations, especially, you'll see transaction fees can go up to $100,000. It's not that unusual. I mean, that's still all just value that's going to the block producers, and obviously in a extremely consensus destabilizing manner.
Yep, absolutely. Where the benefits of Flashbots comes in are really to the bots and the searchers themselves, because they can protect themselves from failed trades. They don't need to submit 100 transactions. They can only submit one, for any one opportunity. In the past, there were some really odd scenarios where people would actually be more profitable to submit, hundreds of transactions instead of just one, and that would flood the blocks. So Flashbots definitely solves a lot of problems, but unfortunately, it doesn't solve the gas auction grim trigger problem. Now, coordinating using Flashbots is definitely a good idea, but it's not like an end solution, really. It just can kind of help in some cases, really.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that these
okay.
aren't mutually exclusive things.
Yeah, exactly. That's correct. So you can use Flashbots in the wild to do whatever you want. You can use, you coordinate as a keeper with KeeperDAO however you want, and you can also coordinate as a keeper with KeeperDAO using Flashbots. So exactly, that's important to know. Obviously, we're not announcing too many details of the coordination game yet. That will come in the very near future. And we have a lot of questions about that, so we'll get to those questions soon. So the next topic really to get into before we get to community questions is really just around hiding MEV. So this is kind of a follow up of the previous topic where we talked about protocol level versus financial primitives level. And so with KeeperDAO, really what we're doing is we're hiding MEV and ensuring that it can be distributed back to the user. And so there are a lot of folks who benefit from this. And so, maybe first we can just talk about, who benefits from this and why they benefit and how they benefit. And then, maybe how we're doing it, what are some of the strategies involved? And so this is important for keepers. This is important for users as well. So users are the biggest beneficiary of hiding MEV. So a simple example would be, say a user wants to perform an action. It could be a limit order. It could be, maybe they're getting liquidated from their position, becoming unhealthy. And there's, $100 of MEV going to be extracted. If this was happening in the wild, the majority of that $100 would very likely go to the block producers, because you'd have many bots bidding on it, and it would just gas auction all the way up, and then the user wouldn't get anything, right? The user would just, they would execute their trade or they would get liquidated, and that's it. But in the hiding game where we hide MEV, that is essentially distributed back to the user. And it's great because the keeper, which is the bot or the searcher in this case, they can submit their transaction at a normal gas price, like just a fast gas price on something like Gas Now, as opposed to having to bid higher and higher and watch the mempool and keep leapfrogging each other. And so it's much more efficient that way. And then market makers can also be factored into this as well, because a market maker is essentially now an automated user, right? So if you think about being a user from a market maker's perspective, let's say you're market making on Ethereum, and you're putting a buy and a sell order on, say, a wrapped ether with USDT or USDC. Now if your order gets filled, you actually have two opportunities to make a profit as a market maker. So you can make a spread and just capture a spread purely from market making, and you can also capture MEV from your order, right? So if a bot uses your order to capture MEV somewhere else, you get that right back in your pocket. And obviously the user does as well. And a market maker is just essentially an automated user. But it's interesting that that this is now a nice bonus for market makers who want to get involved. And then keepers, obviously this is very beneficial to them, because now keepers don't have to spend so much time and resources and effort on front running and grim triggering and trading strategies and making sure that their mempool analysis is quick enough to kind of nose everybody out. And it's more focused on efficiency. So keepers now, instead of doing that battle of being the best and the fastest bot, now they're kind of just focusing on efficiency, gas efficiency, making sure they're routing trades properly. If somebody wants to sell 1 ether, make sure that that's routed to the most efficient place where you're going to get the best price. And that's really all you have to focus on. And what's really nice about it too is, because this is in a walled garden, you're now kind of playing the second game instead of the millisecond game. And so there's not this emphasis on squeezing every millisecond out of your bot that you can, because this is essentially a arbitrage that's only extractable by a whitelisted KeeperDAO keeper, which is really nice. And so there are lots of different ways to hide MEV using smart contracts. And today, the two ways we're doing it are through limit orders and lending positions or liquidations. And we actually have some other really interesting ideas for the future. We won't get into those today, but for right now, the two examples are, say a user or a market maker submits a limit order, and then the keeper executes that on their behalf, extracts the MEV, gives it back, and the keeper gets a share of the MEV. The user gets the largest share of the MEV, and then. Let's see. For a liquidation, it's very very similar, right? So say a position's going to get liquidated, instead of that giant chunk of MEV, going straight to the gas auction, that goes straight back to the user, and it's great because now the user can essentially have a better experience than before, because our just-in-time underwriter is applying that nice buffer to the position. Now, a whitelisted KeeperDAO keeper can essentially liquidate that in a comfortable place where no non-whitelisted keeper can, or no non-whitelisted bot can. And so, we essentially, perform the liquidation, pay the user off. The keeper gets to keep his chunk of the change. And then everyone's actually better off. And it's great because, now instead of going directly to the lending, protocol, you're actually better off, because in the event you do get liquidated, you actually get, a receipt with cash back. It's great.
Yeah, this is absolutely. Go on.
Oh, I was just going to kind of lead into, community questions, but feel free to dive in some more.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think this is absolutely like the ideal progression for liquidation. And I don't see any reason why a person who is taking a lending position shouldn't be able to strike some kind of deal with the keeper to share in the profits in the worst case scenario that they do get liquidated. And I also think having users as a beneficiary from MEV is super important here, because ultimately they're the people who are creating the opportunities. I mean, and currently they're just getting nothing out of all of the value that they're creating. In traditional finance, again, users get none of the value that they create, and it actually gives us an opportunity here to do something different, where we put the user in the position of taking some of the rewards from the value that they're creating, rather than just sucking it all off the table and giving it to other parties. So yeah, I think philosophically, I'm very aligned with the idea of users being a strong beneficiary in the value that they're creating.
Wow, guys, this has been absolutely awesome. So first, let me say a big thank you to both Jay-Z and Nathan for this presentation and conversation. I mean, there is so much alpha that's in this, but really the wealth of knowledge and experience that you guys have and sharing it with us is just something that I feel like I'm just slowly creeping up that left side of the bell curve every time I listen to you guys. So I'm really excited for that. And just so first, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on us. We do have more than a few community questions, which we're going to get right to, but I wanted to get into a quick special surprise for everybody. We're going to be going out and we're going to be distributing for this inaugural KeeperDAO Community Call NFT badges via POAP to commemorate this fun occasion for us. So I don't know if you guys have seen in the chat channel above this stage that the POAP bot is in there. So for you to redeem or claim your very own NFT badge, you're going to DM the POAP bot the phrase, all in lowercase, ninja. And that's got a fun meaning for us here at KeeperDAO. But as soon as you DM that phrase to the POAP bot, it will send you a link for you to claim your NFT. And so we hope a bunch of you grab that. It's something that we think is fun and exciting, something that we probably want to do to commemorate each of these calls moving forward. But now that that's out of the bag, let's just hop into the questions. We got a number of the people that ask questions in the audience. But I'm just going to hop right in with the first question here. So this was a question that was submitted around the hiding game. So in terms of the hiding game, I'd love to hear from Jay-Z and Nathan, what's our long-term vision here? Do we expect to have a lot of people trading directly on the KeeperDAO app instead of on Matcha, 1inch, Uniswap, etc.?
Yeah, this is a great question. So really, we have the hiding game today with one whitelist keeper, and coordination is really the natural progression of that. So first you find a way to hide the MEV and give it back to the user, and then you kind of build an economy that creates any number of users and any number of keepers to all participate while prospering and capturing and distributing this MEV. We expect the volume to come from a combination of users, partners, which would be their users. It could be a wallet, a DEX aggregator, anything like that, and market makers. And so this really kind of adds a lot of value opportunities for those folks. Now, specifically, say a human who wants to make a trade. There's many different ways they could go about their trade. They could place an order where they're the taker paying the gas. They could place essentially what we're referring to as like an instant limit order, where they place a limit order with us that could potentially be instantly executable. There are a lot of difficulties around the UI and UX for that, and we are still working on them. We will be revisiting that likely after coordination launches, just because that changes a bit. But yeah, I think right now the most ideal scenario for using KeeperDAO's app as a human to make a trade is placing limit orders. So in the future, we definitely are going to be revisiting that instant exchange sort of upgrade feature. And it does involve a lot of UI UX, and it also may even involve a protocol upgrade, which is interesting. So we have a lot of research being done on that at the moment.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, let's go right to the next question. So staying on the hiding game, where do you expect most of the volume to come from integrations? What is exactly an integration, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so we expect it to come from a combination of users, partners, which would be their users, and then market makers. And so, human users are just people who are, coming and wanting to trade. And then partner users could be something like a DEX aggregator, like Matcha, for example. And, any DEX, any partner could integrate their API into us, so they could essentially add a limit order feature just by hooking into our network. And then also, market makers are a big opportunity. Anyone who wants to kind of put a spread on both sides and kind of capture the MEV while capturing a spread. I see a lot of different ways this could pan out. It's very possible that human users lead the way here, but it's also very possible that, say, automated market makers could kind of lead the majority of the volume as well. And who knows, maybe it could be a mix of both.
I think for market makers, there's a sort of natural product market fit here, because if you have some kind of order flow, what are you going to do with it, really? You're going to either try and extract value from it, which is what we're providing here, or you're just going to send it to the mempool where someone else is going to extract value from it. So, dealing with market makers and their order flow, I think, is a very natural product market fit here.
Awesome. Well, okay, thanks, guys. The next question here: how many keepers do you anticipate we will have when the coordination game goes live? Is there a maximum number of keepers, or will we accept everybody?
Yeah, great question. So the goal is to launch with approximately 3 to 4. That way we can focus on a small subset of guys that we talk to on a regular basis while we fine tune and work out the kinks. And then shortly after, say maybe a month later or maybe 2 months later, we'll onboard a lot more. We will only be onboarding, say, experts and experienced traders for the time being. We do have some plans to coordinate like general tasks, as opposed to just trades and liquidations as well. And that would be a really good case for catering towards like new and intermediate keepers who are just kind of getting their feet wet with automation. So definitely, keep your eyes out for that. But I'd say, as far as like opening the floodgates and allowing everybody, we're not planning on doing that this year. But we're catering to the veterans, the experts, and the experienced folks. So if you are in that category, definitely reach out to us, because we would like to welcome you aboard. And those docs for onboarding, haven't been published yet, and those will be out, soon.
I think there's a kind of interesting question here, which is how many keepers is optimal in a market? Like what number of keepers do you actually find market efficiency in? I think that's kind of an unanswered question at the moment. It's definitely not thousands and thousands. It's definitely not one either. And I think, the more dexes, pairs, strategies, and so on that are involved in the market, probably the number starts to go up. For example, if you just say you have a market and it only has Uniswap and SushiSwap, that's it. That's the whole market. You could probably create efficiency in that market with a single arbitrage bot that is just taking all of the arbitrage opportunity and extracting the value. But as soon as you add a new exchange, you start to exponentially grow the amount of paths and so on that the bots can trade. So as you add more protocols and you add more things into the ecosystem, you probably start to increase the number of keepers that you need to bring efficiency to the market. But it's kind of interesting that we're going to find this out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great discussion topic that we could probably do an entire community call on, and we likely may after we launch. We're trying to keep a few features kind of under wraps until we get out the door a bit, but absolutely. And I think it kind of goes back to one of our first discussion topics where you talk about like keepers specializing in one thing versus casting a wide net. I think we're ultimately going to find keepers doing the same thing within the coordination game, and they may run multiple bots within the coordination game, and we're going to support that. And there's going to be multiple strategies of all different varieties supported.
All right. The next question: what is the roadmap for future KeeperDAO community development? Do you think KeeperDAO will change from a niche DAO to a mass organization? How do different nationality community members better participate in KeeperDAO?
Yeah, this is a great question. We're actually planning one or more community calls specifically on this topic, so stay tuned for more information on this question.
Yeah, totally. And if any of you guys out there, as kind of our community engagement, external affairs guy, if you have any fun ideas on this, send me a DM. I'm always happy to talk with anybody about fun ideas around this, better ways to engage. So come right to me, post it in the community call forum or in initiatives, and we can investigate that to see if this is something the community wants to see more of. The next question I've got is: the coordination game is what I believe makes or breaks KeeperDAO. How far are you in development? Do we have rough expectations for dates? What is the testing looking like behind the scenes?
This is a great question, and we are trying to keep as much under wraps as we can, but I'm happy to answer as much as I can here. So we are very far in development. So the design of coordination has gone through many iterations over the last year or more. And we absolutely love this current design, and it's actually a lot of the foundation has already been fully developed. That we're spending a lot of time kind of working on edge cases, kind of fixing kinks, and kind of fine tuning our algorithms, and making sure the economics are proper, and also making sure that we can support as many keepers as possible to do whatever they want, however they want to do it. And that's very important to us, is we want keepers, to have very, very minimal friction when integrating their bots. And as far as launch dates go, we're not going to throw out a date just yet, but definitely within the next couple months, we should be on track to launch. Again, we have a lot of stuff working right now. It's like the kind of milestones really that we're looking at. We recently completed our milestone 2. Without going into too much details, one of the next milestones will kind of bring things full circle. So milestone 2 is a really big step because we have things like working like end to end everywhere except for like one piece, and then the next milestone is going to kind of bring things together and get that last big piece in there. And then, at that point, it's mostly just documentation and preparing everybody. So lots of test driving, lots of successes. As far as, early successes, absolutely. So there's no I guess, black boxes. There's no question marks. It's just a matter of just kind of getting it all done and working properly and making sure that the documentation makes sense. Everything is definitely known science, and just a matter of typing, I guess.
It makes it sound easier than it is. It's just a matter of typing, but
I know, right? Well, what's funny is like I said, like, you know, at least a year in the actual of iterating over the actual design and the economics of it all. And as far as the programming, and it's just it's a lot to wrap your head around. And but just typing it out is like, you know, it's funny because so much work goes into thinking it, planning it. This is one of those times where, you know, you'll hear an engineer, a programmer will say like, oh yeah, spend most of your time thinking and planning and less programming. Usually they don't do that. Usually they just jump in, MVP it, and then program all day, program all night. But this is actually one of those times where, you know, that's actually not the case. Lots of planning and going into it. So
Yeah, I mean, that's something I've noticed in MEB development a lot. It's one of those things where you'll think you might be at the computer and you'll write one line of code and then you'll think for 2 hours. Just maybe you'll pace around the room just thinking. Then you'll write like another 4 lines of code. Then you'll think for like another few hours, write some more lines of code. It's like the thinking is almost, the conceptualizing, the thinking is almost 95+% of the work here.
yeah, absolutely. And a lot of it too is, even once we kind of get something nailed down, you know, have a phone call with somebody, you know, and trust, who's been trading for years, and bounce these ideas off them, see what they think. Definitely valuable to kind of do that.
Awesome. So the next call I have, or the next question I have, is directed towards Nathan. Nathan, you were very active in the Flashbots Discord discussions, but KeeperDAO is rarely mentioned there. Why are the searchers on Flashbots not talking as much about KeeperDAO, or at least they don't seem to show that they are? Do you have any insight on kind of overlap between these communities?
Yeah, I mean, searchers are capitalistic and very pragmatic people. You know, they're there to make the money, and they're driven by the pursuit of the profit. So, and there's a lot going on. So I think really it's just purely a lack of ability to participate right now. If you put an opportunity in front of a searcher to make money, they're going to chase it and they're going to be talking about it. Right now, they don't have an easy pathway to become a keeper with KeeperDAO, so it's not going to be in the forefront of a lot of people's minds. But if you present a profit opportunity for them, that's obviously going to change in an instant.
For sure. Thank you. All right. So the last question that we've got here is, can the coordination game contracts and environment easily be forked or replicated?
Yeah, great question. And the answer is no, because the coordination game is much larger than a contract or two. So it's infrastructure, it's a network, you know, it's a DAO maintaining a whitelist. You know, it's as we onboard users, partners, market makers, these parties, and keepers as well. These parties kind of stay within the ecosystem. And if someone were to fork KeeperDAO's contracts, you know, not only would they have to rebuild all of the infrastructure from scratch, because, you know, that's not open source, but they would also have to attract users, you know, partners, market makers, etc., in order for it to make any sense. So, and, you know, that goes well beyond just copying and pasting. So this is not a scenario, you know, where you know, a SushiSwap fork from Uniswap would really happen.
Yeah, I mean, you can't fork a community, and the level of complexity that would be involved in understanding it well enough to fork it properly, I think the person would probably end up working for KeeperDAO.
Yeah, right.
That's awesome. Well, hey guys, this has been absolutely awesome, fantastic, insightful stuff. And really, you know, your guys's, level of expertise here just really adds weight to, all the information you've provided. And so folks, for here on the call, remember, if you had a question that didn't get answered today, or if you got new questions as a result of the call, feel free to post them in the chat channel, and myself or someone from the labs team will try to answer as many as possible and keep the conversations rolling. Just another quick reminder, if you missed it somehow a few minutes back, the POAP badge claim code for you to DM to the POAP bot is all underscore or all lowercase ninja. DM that to the POAP bot, and you'll have a link sent to you. And then lastly, we have some upcoming initiatives by the labs team that we just want to quickly hint at. The first is, with our governance white paper out there, there's some amazing work that was done by both the core team and the labs team on this. And we really want you to dive into it and help us, build, develop, and question every part of of what we believe is a novel and exciting new form of governance. So we'll be hosting governance office hours next Tuesday with Lapras and Hazard in the Discord, and then we will also be doing a formal community call with them as well. So stay tuned for announcements on those. But office hours will be coming first. As I mentioned previously, I still am open to fun suggestions of anything that this community wants to do or share that they're passionate about. So it doesn't even have to be specific to products, features, integrations, partnerships. If you have, an interest in playing chess, playing poker, getting a tournament going, anything like that, you'd love to see us organize and get people to create some passion and excitement around, send me a DM. I'd love to keep this conversation going. But here as we're wrapping up, I just want to say big thank you to not just Jay-Z and Nathan, but to the whole KeeperDAO team for the help putting this together. And thank you to all of you guys for joining and listening to us on this very first call. There's more to come, and I think that Jay-Z might have one last special announcement. So Jay-Z, you got a last little comment here?
Yeah, absolutely. We are hiring. So if anybody wants to join us as a DeFi engineer, you would work, directly with me and Nathan and folks just like us, solving these types of problems, building, smart contracts, building automation software, we're working on the coordinator, the hiding game, etc. Please reach out. You can check our GitHub and we've got the job posting right on there.
All right, guys. Well, hey, thank you all so much, everybody. It's been a pleasure. We're going to close this down now, but I'll be around in the chat and most of today. So thanks again, and we'll see you on the next KeeperDAO Community Call. This is What's the Deets signing off. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.